Hello, and thank you very much for joining us on another Talk HR UK podcast. Super excited to be sharing this one with you because not only is it our first episode in season 2, which of course means we have finally concluded season 1, the best part of 30 podcasts later, which has been an incredible journey for both Simon and I and the wider HR team at Alexander Lloyd, but also just in terms of the thought-provoking conversations that we've had and sharing like-minded conversations with other HR leaders and professionals in the market. So it's been incredible. So thank you so much for everybody that's participated and listened. But more importantly, you've not come here to hear me ramble on. Let me introduce my guest to you and what we discussed in this podcast. So first and foremost, we were fortunate enough to have Richard Holgate join us as the head of HR at Student Beans. Student Beans is a really exciting business, actually. They operate globally. They are in the marketing and technology sector, and some of their client portfolio is incredible. So they've got Dominos, Google, McDonalds, just to name a few. So it's a really exciting business going places. Rich and I got together and had this conversation to really discuss the difference between people services and HR services, and what does that really mean? And I guess you might look at it and say HR is a lot more sort of managing process and procedures, but people services could be so much more than that, and it's about getting to the root of the problem before it even becomes a problem. How commercial are we? How much business partnering can we do in any line of HR, not just maybe a stereotypical sort of HRBP type of position, and adding that extra layer of commerciality and support. So it was a great conversation. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'll jump straight to it. Rich, thank you so much again for joining us today. I know it's been an incredibly tense year for you by the sounds of it, and you're going to share more of your story in a second. But looking forward to this podcast. So we've got quite a bit on the agenda, so we probably want to delve straight into it, don't we?
Sounds good. Yeah, looking forward to it.
So just for the purpose of our listeners, if that's okay, could you give us a bit of context as to how life has been for you and of course, Student Beans, who you work for?
Yeah, of course. So it's, like I said, been an interesting 12 months, but beyond as well. I think, in terms of me, I've just stepped into this head of people operations role, which is, kind of formalizing a lot of the work that we do in Student Beans around sort of how we're approaching HR or the content of HR and how we're sort of adapting it for our sort of business, our culture. And from a business perspective, we, like many others, are sort of dusting off the previous 12 months and looking ahead. And we've been quite fortunate in a lot of ways in how our business model has been able to navigate a lot of the challenges of the pandemic in the last 12 months and in our business model. So that's been positive. And then from my corner of the world, in terms of that people side, it's been really great. Working as sort of humanly as possible, as close as possible, in what has been a lot of forced change and unforeseen challenges. And so we're in a good place. We just hit over the 200 headcount mark for the first time in our 16-year history, and onwards and upwards from here. And we're fully into that hyper growth stage as a business, and that comes with some incredibly exciting challenges that I'm sure we'll come on to.
Yeah, it's a really interesting journey, and I'm trying to think about how your business has been affected by the pandemic. So if you don't mind, I just wanted to sort of probe on it. Of course, you're a marketing technology business that brings and connects students and businesses, retailers, hospitality, so forth, on discounts and loyalty programs. So with a lot of your clients probably hit by the market, how have you still managed to sort of grow, and what was the strategy from the business?
Yeah, certainly. I think it was really interesting seeing how our client, in that initial response, going back, 12 months ago, obviously everyone was very much sort of batten down the hatches of it and kind of regroup internally, which of course everyone had to do. But what we've started to see is, Student Beans, and I'm sure my colleagues will crucify me for saying this, but it's a Groupon for students in terms of that student discount exclusively from a loyalty perspective is providing an outreach to students around the entire world, and we're the biggest platform to do so. And so what we then are, and then from a sort of B2B side, is have these clients who are obviously having hits themselves and then trying to work on their own strategy around, well, how can we, if we've missed generation of customers here, how can we focus on the next one? And of course, the next generation of customers is students. So we were getting actually more than ever, almost, business come to us and sort of say, look, we've had this hit, we've had this impact. We need to focus on the recovery plan, and we want to start bringing in a younger, new generation of customers. And how can you help? And so that was, a little bit unexpected. And of course, whilst I don't want to say we're sort of recession proof, I don't think that's probably a bit too much to say, but we certainly we're quite malleable in that regard, so we can work quite closely with clients in that rebound effect, and to success for sure.
I'd imagine it's a two-part. It's the relationship you got with a lot of your B2B, your clients as such, and they could see you as a business that can facilitate their growth and help them recover quicker by making the connections and being there first, as opposed to being reactive. So did you find that over the last 12 months, first of all, from a business perspective, and then from a people agenda perspective, did you find the last 12 months allowed you the time, the breathing space, to be able to re-strategize and really focus on your customer experience and what you're looking to do?
It was an interesting, it did, but not by design, I suppose. Where, like I said, everyone sort of had to regroup internally. We were able just to, take pause and look at where we were at, and look at how we were structured in terms of, how we kind of operated in terms of, kind of our client in our agreements. And so what it gave us an opportunity to do was to double down on what was working and quickly amend what wasn't working. And I think that was the biggest change in, I suppose, strategy that we had, without going into too much detail. But and then from a people perspective, it was hard. It was tough. And I think that was one of our biggest challenges, was that, as everyone was thrust into this remote world, and in a huge societal anxiety, and it's very difficult. So we quickly, in terms of this breathing space, and from a strategy point of view, sort of look, we need to be people first here. We need to sort of actually focus foremost, and everything that we do and everything that we change or act on has got to be with that that objective first. That first objective, sorry, which is people first. And again, I really do think and strongly believe that led to that was a huge backbone in how we sustained ourselves in the last 12 months, for sure.
Let's delve into the people strategy then for Student Beans. What has changed maybe for you and the people agenda, and where do you think you're going?
So not a huge amount has changed, and I say that deliberately, because we've always we're going to I think can come on to talk about the kind of concept of people ops and people, and why we purposely say that instead of HR. And so when I say not a lot has changed, it's because we've always had a people first approach in terms of our culture. We've deliberately avoided where possible to sort of terms like HR, and have that almost corporate inflection, because what we've really spent a lot of time is from a people strategy, is being that inclusive, transparent, and building and focusing on behavior management and expectation management more than policy management. And so in terms of our people agenda, we have had the luxury of then having and leveraging, going back in slightly to this pandemic 12 months ago, is leveraging an already strong culture to sort of say, this is who we are, this is what we're doing. And it wasn't too jarring for our employees to go, well, this is a huge curveball. I suppose our biggest, where there was more challenging conversation, such as furlough and those types of things, that was more of a surprise, because again, as a culture, we weren't used to talking about maybe those types of conversations. But by working already off a strong foundation, was that we were able to sort of, again, double down on that, and that was successful.
I think it's testament to the fact that your business sees HR as a people services, a partner, which of course is something we're going to delve into a little bit more, rather than an HR resource. It gave you the ability to tackle really difficult and sensitive conversations, like you said, that weren't common in your workplace because of the type of business you are and the growth that you had and everything else behind you. But without that, do you think that actually you would have hit more challenges having those difficult conversations, and actually it could have been a very different 12 months?
100%. like 100%. And don't get me wrong, like I'm fear I don't want to be sort of sound like it was too rose tinted. It was all very easy. Like, you know, we had to have had, like many other people, have had to have a lot of difficult conversations, you know, with their employees in the business. But like kind of going back to a previous point around sort of our strategy was that, you know, by being that people first, is that we brought together, like, for example, on all hands, you know, an entire company, and gave a very clear landscape where if we didn't do X, Y, and Z, the impact could be X, Y, and Z. And we wanted to treat people like adults and allow them in collaborating with us to make informed decisions. So, in a round, for example, like furlough, for example, is not just sort of telling them the action of the business. It's inviting them to understand the reason why and our overall intent of, it being temporary. And I think that was fundamental. And had we not had that, I think we would have had a much more challenging 12 months for sure.
Definitely. And I think because we've touched on it, it's only appropriate we delve into it. You're hugely passionate about being seen as a people services function, a people business partnering capacity. In your world, what is the difference between people versus HR? Where's...
I'm really irritatingly persistent on it. and in truth, it's because I've experienced sort of both ends of the spectrum. I find, and I think maybe my peers will say that can be a blend of two, but I do find them quite polarizing. And I think you've got, I've used sort of HR in its traditional sense as a very sort of reactive department that, even from like a, can be almost like a ticketed request system almost, HRIS of the world. And, it can be a very reactive measure that is, this is the problem, let's go to HR to resolve. Whereas what I prefer and what I believe in and what I'm trying to build at Student Beans is a much more proactive department. And, I've always, remember going back to my first ACAS day of introduction to employment law, it's always about correcting behaviors. And it's so important because, if you're proactively identifying performance needs, for example, or succession planning or any of those types of things, then, it's a much more dynamic environment whereby, we've showed at Student Beans is, you're from a data points point of view, you're having less employment relations issues, for example, amongst other things. And I think you start seeing it across, the content of people ops. I think you're starting to see it across the industry now as a much more prominent, beyond just a PR stunt, is a much more prominent sort of in thing. And I always remember, David saw recently that Octopus Energy, that there's a BBC News spread about.
Doesn't have HR.
Well, apparently it doesn't have HR. I mean, it probably makes his 20 HR employees on LinkedIn a bit nervous, but
exactly.
But it was a really interesting. His principle is like, well, why spend 30 grand on a people HR advisor, where you can spend 30 grand on training on managers, on performance management, correcting behaviours and those types of things. Now, it's not maybe like for like how I agree, but it's a hugely interesting concept of, again, leveraging skills within managers to proactively identify us before it's too late, essentially. And so I'm a big advocate of people ops in terms of that more sort of dynamic and having more. And I'm talking about agile, not agile from the capital A agile, but agile in terms of that more dynamic department. I think it's really important.
I think my biggest concern, what we've noticed in the last 12 months, is you've got businesses going in two different directions at the moment. You've got those that are clearly following a path of business partnering, commercial. They're going to be there at the front line and build these reports, build these relationships to mitigate all of these problems like you referred to. And then, unfortunately, you get on the other side of the direction and strategy, and that's let's implement shared services. And of course, this shared services model is usual for very big blue chip organizations. It's fairly common. I think you've probably been part of that sort of structure previously, but we're starting to see it creep into the SME world as well. And it's not a true shared services, but that's the model they're trying to fit.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's less is more, isn't it? It's trying to, ultimately, and I'm sure everyone who has or does work in HR will identify with this for, this sentence, but we're not a revenue generating department, and we never have been. So, when you're looking at from an investment point of view, there will always be ways to try and optimize minimal headcount, and those shared services are a hugely efficient way. Even outsourcing of HR, I sort of see quite regularly as well, whereas you've got outsourced HR across 10 different companies now. I don't like that personally.
No. I think it's counterproductive.
Well, it is, and again, what you risk doing, I think, is again defaulting back to policy management, and so it's not therefore a true partnering opportunity. So we talked about people ops here at Student Beans, and we're treating our employees like it's like a product. Our employee experience is like a product, and by changing our people ops into a product department, we're able to properly quantify experience by putting in data metrics, not just your performance measures, but your employee pulse, your eNPS. And we've got the value streams of recruitment, of people, of L&D. We can really get underneath our employee experience. That will only benefit its internal employee experience, and then retention and attraction too.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I think also from a demand perspective, it's probably where most HR professionals would prefer to be and work in. They enjoy it. That being said, there's always the odd person that loves operations, and they're probably blimmin' good at it as well. So, it's okay to, for me, it's okay to accept that there will be some businesses out there that probably just suit an HR operations model. And that's great. They need to own it and identify with it. I still think if you've got that model, you can still offer a lot of strategic experience and expertise, as long as you've got the backing and the support to have the infrastructure. Without the infrastructure, you just become another ticketing system.
100%. And that's where I found a lot of success at Student Beans myself. So I've got to fully acknowledge that my experience and my opinion is from on sort of people operations and this dynamic is because I'm not CIPD qualified. I'm a very operational person, and my history has been in operational roles. So that's I suppose that's my forte, and that's why I strongly agree. That's why I think it's the right way to do it.
You walk the journey.
Oh, exactly. So there's definitely other ways, and I lost my train of thought a bit there, but I think like with shared services and those and the benefits of it is that it's volume, and look, I'm talking now as a company of 200 people. When we get to 500,000, we may need to change our model, because its current approach might not be scalable, and I'll fight that as long as I can, and hopefully I can find the best mix. But at the moment, in terms of a company of 200 people, it's we have to get involved, and we have to therefore step back and understand our data metrics to be able to get in, and help the business grow.
You say that, but there's a lot of SMEs that we know of and also work with, who might sell the story of sort of commercial business partnering. But even then, unless the business buys into the vision, they can treat HR sometimes fairly transactional. And I think the other nervousness that I have is for a lot of businesses who have had to endure a huge amount of transactional work, from ER cases through to furlough schemes, redundancies. It may feel like that is all there is in HR for them, because that's all they've had to live 24/7 for a 12-month period. But there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's so much more we can do. And business leaders outside the HR community, of course, they need to make sure they don't forget that and they don't lose the true value. Otherwise, we're just going to take a step back and have to.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. And, I think we'll sort of talk shortly about, the concept of HR in the last 12 months. And, we've spoken before about, it seems to be like there are pockets where, HR's either advanced itself hugely in the last 12 months by, the concept of furlough, remote work, and all those things, or you've then got that other side of the spectrum where you sort of see a lot of HR functions regressing 10, 15 years, into that very old sort of risk management sort of, purely. And it's, and I've found like it's been totally polarizing in terms of like, it seems to be either, one or the other almost. And that comes down to, I suppose, like you said, the business leaders outside the community and how they want to use their HR function. And it's, there's not been one size fits all approach for sure.
No, absolutely. So talk to me about the landscape from your perspective. What do you think has changed significantly in HR, and where do we think we're going to go? And I guess it doesn't need to be over just the last 12 months, but maybe over the last 5 years.
Yeah, I'm enjoying more networking and cross collaboration with HR professionals than I ever have done before. And I think, one of the biggest changes is, I think before, 2020 and maybe going slightly back, I think it used to be quite a guarded department, guarded function. It's obviously one that can be, carry a lot of scrutiny over people who have opinion on how you do things. And so I think historically I found it to be quite guarded and, reluctant to sort of, work with too many across the industry. And that's just my personal experience. It's been fascinating and incredible, actually going from that, this is how we do it and you're not going to know, to everyone going to each other across the HR world and going, how the hell do we do this? Like, let's talk to each other and being, and I've been, lucky to be part of a huge amount of focus groups and work, that's kind of sat down and gone, okay, so in the UK, we've got this concept of furlough. What does it mean? What should we be doing? And talking to industry bodies, obviously beyond just, ACAS, CIPD, and, really just this, it's been an incredible 12, 18 months of actually everyone sitting down and working more closely together than I have ever seen before. And that's been great to see.
It's interesting you talk about CIPD, and I don't want to be too controversial because I know there'll be some in my network who probably work for CIPD and have close affiliations, but I think there's a huge part that they can play with the language of HR and the mentoring and the support. And I think sometimes my personal opinion is they leave it all to HR to fight the corner.
Yeah.
And perhaps they could do more with business leaders and to be a spokesperson, to really put forward the agenda. I mean, I historically, before coming into HR recruitment, I came into finance, and finance was all about qualifications. HR is refreshingly not about qualifications. It is about experience, and there's some advantages to some of the qualifications, but I think what it does sometimes lack is that extra voice. And I can notice it with finance. They had that from ACCA, YOSEMA. I mean, the half a dozen different qualifications in that world, but maybe that's a story for us on a different day on that one.
No, but it's a good point, because we have an opportunity. So right now now the dust is settling, we're moving forward, and let's move on from the last 12 months. But look, we have an opportunity within HR, industry professionals have an opportunity more than we have ever had before to modernize and evolve the concept of HR. And going back to the CIPD, I don't want to criticize it. It's an incredible body, but you're absolutely right in that. In the last, we've been screaming to look at remote working. We've been screaming to look at work from home and have it as more of a recognised thing. We had to then deal with it overnight, and I like to think, on the whole, it's been dealt with very well. And that's an exciting path ahead. I would love an opportunity to sort of sit down and we can then all shape, actually, instead of playing catch up all the time. Let's actually look and show what's ahead. Your diversity pay gaps and those incredible initiatives that actually we can not worry about waiting for society to dictate what we should be doing. Let's actually sit there and go, let's head this way, and this is our direction of travel. And I think we as an industry have an opportunity more than ever, because of the work that we've done the last 12 months on the whole, is to justify that conversation.
Every single person we've had on a podcast or the clients that we talk to, everybody has that same shared vision, but not everybody is willing to put themselves out there. And I guess that's the challenge. It's we've all got a lot on our plates, and it takes a lot of energy, and it takes a team collaborative approach. But I think surely and slowly we will get there. I have every confidence. I think the more people that can, like yourself today, Rich, if you can speak on these sort of platforms and across the industry, we'll get there and voice it. And I think before long we might hit some new milestones.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I think we, I'm talking about my peers and I think we've justified the right to sort of shout it, and we won't get a better chance than this almost. Having proven ourselves historically, but more so than ever, of late. I think we have to capitalize on the momentum and newfound sort of respect. I say very loosely, but do you know what I mean? Like that HR professionals I think have garnered in the last 12 months.
Absolutely. And I think there's also an ounce of responsibility that we also have to communicate exactly how HR should engage with the wider business and be perceived. Because, of course, if you operate in the old model and if it is very transactional, you're never going to break that mold. You've got to change that culture and perception, right?
Yeah, 100% agree.
Rich, Thank you so much. I think this has been really insightful. I hope any of our listeners, if they are going to take one piece of valuable information away, is just the fact that HR is an added resource and valuable resource. Let's make the most of it. Let's talk about the positivity and the strategy and how we can get there before any issues arise, let alone anything else, and talk about fun things, succession planning, talent management, learning and development. These are some great initiatives in around the HR capacity, org design. There's loads. There's absolutely loads. Rich, thanks again so much. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Damien. Good to chat.